So this is an oversized hoodie that I'm going to refashion into a bell sleeve tunic top. Okay, first I will cut off the sleeves so that you can do it in one shot. Or you can just cut around it just to be safe, which I'm going to do now. So what I'm going to do is, after I cut off the sleeve, that's one sleeve. So basically what I'm doing, I'm going to flip it so that I get more of a balloon sleeve and more fullness at the bottom, and then reattach the cuff. So you have to really measure your bicep to see if it's this wide. I know I have to probably cut it down here so it fits all the way up my arm. And then I'm going to use this cuff and attach it down here. And I'll show you how to do that later. Well, at first I was going to cut up to here, but I just realized it makes more sense just to cut all the way up to the arm seam. So that's what I'm going to do, because you're going to have to tailor it a little bit anyway. So I'm going to cut this all the way up. But you're just going to have to cut off the excess anyway, so it just makes sense to do it now. Okay, so now you see it's just this and the hood. So at first I was going to keep the hood on, but I said it would be better as like a mock neck or a cowl neck or like a turtleneck kind of, but it's going to be bigger. So I'm going to cut this off too, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so here's the hood. You're going to have to cut all of this excess off, otherwise you're not going to be able to sew it up. And I'm not going to need this draw cord, so I'll take that out and use that for something else. But if you see the hood, just cut this part off here, and I'm going to have to get rid of the buttonholes. So this is going to be sewn and have some type of mock neck there. Haven't figured it out yet, but I will. So now you have to see how wide your bicep is so that it goes all the way up. And the way to take your bicep measurement is to go to its widest part. Mine is about 15, so half of that is 7.5. I just want a little extra room so it's not too tight. So let's say about 8 inches. Okay, once you cut this off, do not throw this part away because we're going to need it for the collar, okay? Curve it just slightly. Remember to do the same thing with the other sleeve. So remember, you're going to reuse the cuff. Let's cut this off. It's going to be slightly shorter because you're cutting off the seam allowance. So this is going to be the top of the sleeve here, and this is going to be the bottom of the sleeve. Okay, now we have to clean up this edge because right now, if you see, okay, so now we're going to take off the seam allowance here, and clean this edge up. Do it on both sleeves already did it on this sleeve, but I'll show you how I did it here. So just basically in the seam, you just cut off the excess. Do that on both sides. This is the new armhole, and this is the new bottom. And you're going to attach the cuff to the bottom of this. You gather this up. So that's that. So the hood, we have to get rid of this seam. So we're going to cut this off too. Trim this. And also trim the front part of this. So make sure you cut this off so it can, you can separate the hood from the self from the lining. The self is the front, the lining is the gray. So you want to be able to separate it. So you have to cut outside the seam. Okay, so now you have the hood without the lining. And we're going to sew this back onto the top. But we're not going to make it a hood. We're going to make it a mock neck. It's going to be a high mock neck. You're going to duplicate it here so that this can be the top part and this is the neck. So we're going to copy the neck. And now you just have to sew this together here, and this is going to be the neck. Just make sure that this can go over your head. Before you did the cutting, I should have said that from the beginning. Make sure that this piece can go over your head. This, if you remember, we cut off about an inch here and an inch here off of the front. So I tried this, and of course it cannot go over my head, so we're going to use what's left of the sleeve, and we're going to make this as wide as possible. I'm going to add about 5 inches to this. So this is about 5 inches. So I had to use the piece of the sleeve, and I matched this as an extension of the collar. So this is the extension of the collar, and this is going to be the insert so that it matches the neck seam here. We're going to sew all of this together here. So this part came from one of the sleeves, and I just took it from, this is the fold, cut this part here, and then use this to match up and trimmed along this so that it matched this height, because you see it gets a little bit narrower here. So the collar is not going to be as high, but at least it'll be even. So now we have all our pieces. We have the collar with the extension, the 2 rib, the sleeves, and the front and back. So now we're going to sew everything up. So now I'm going to sew the collar and the extension piece. Just match as best you can. Doesn't have to be perfect. And you attach both sides. Then you fold and try to straighten out the seams as much as possible. And put that to the side. Next we're going to do the sleeve. We're going to add fullness, well, the gathers. So we have to go around the bottom of the sleeve twice with 2 wide stitches so you can gather it. So please make sure that you put it on your largest stitch, which is usually like a 4 on your machine, and now you just pull it to gather it so that it can match the same size as your rib. So you continue doing it. Just make sure you can get your hand in there and you match your rib to it. So just ease it in so that the sleeve gathers match the rib. Just match the seams, the sleeve seam to the cuff seam, and pin it all together. Once you finish pinning it and easing everything in, then you sew it together. And because this is fleece, it's going to be a little bit bulky, so just work with it as best you can. And I'm using a straight stitch instead of a serger, which you usually do with knits. But because this doesn't stretch that much and is oversized, it doesn't really need the extra give in the seam. So I'm just using a straight stitch. And for the ease of this video, I'm just using a straight stitch instead of a serger, which usually pulls with the knit. But like I said, this doesn't stretch that much, so I can use a straight stitch. So when you go over the stitch, make sure you go over the gathers so you don't see the seam on the outside. And now you have your sleeve cuff and your balloon sleeve. Now we're going to mark the armhole on the front and back. So just match up your sleeve, and I'm just going to mark where I should cut. So you see where it marked all the way down the side seam. So you're cutting off a lot, and you can put it through any shape you want. If you want it tighter or looser, you can actually put it any way you want. So now I just cut it off and I have a side slit. So this is about 8 inches, but I wind up making it higher for once I tried it on. But for this sake and purposes, it was 8 inches. I think the final thing was about maybe 12. So I sewed up the side seam, and then I ease in the sleeve. So you match up the seams and the top, and you pin everything together. And now you sew the sleeve to the armhole. I'm using like a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now you have your sleeve. So this is the collar. I ironed the seams flat, and then I folded it and ironed the top fold. And now I'm going to attach the collar to the neck seam. I notched the front of the collar and I notched the front of the neck seam so that it can match. So you just pin the front together and then you pin the back together, and then you ease in the whole collar to the neck seam. So this might not be perfect. The collar probably will be a little bit smaller than the neck seam because this is an oversize. So pin everything except for the front. So start from the back and start pinning to the front. And there might be a little bit of excess neck seam, and I'll show you what to do with that. If you see this is a little extra. So what we're going to do is we're going to gather it so that it fits the collar. If yours fits perfectly, you don't have to do this, but this is a little accent that really looks nice with the top. So although it's needed, it's a really nice design element that you can add to your tunic or your top. And this just helps ease in the neck seam to the collar. But like I said, if your collar fits your neck, then you don't have to do this. But this is one way to make it fit. So I'm doing 2 rows of gathers as well on the widest stitch, which is usually a 4. And then I'm going to gather this in so it eases in and fits the collar. So it's not a lot of gathers, it's just, just enough so that the collar will fit. Then you pin it up, ease it in, match the notches, the front notches, so it's even on both sides. And just work with it because, like I said, this is fleece, so it's a little thicker. And after you finish pinning everything, you could just sew it up. Again, I use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the neck seam. Usually it's a 1/4 inch, but for these purposes, I'm using a 1/2 inch. And that's the collar with a gather in the front. So initially I made the split 8 inches, but I made it about 15. So I trimmed it out so it looks even. And then I serged the edges and ironed it. Now I'm going to sew it up after I pinned it. It's about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch hem. And I do it on the outside so it is straight. And then I go over the split at the top so that it doesn't rip. So that's the hem. So there you have your balloon sleeve mock neck tunic. If you like this video, please subscribe and I'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.